This episode contains spoilers for Soul. It also features the song Everglaze by Blue Dot Cinema. Welcome to the channel. Today we're taking a look at Teen AP 91, Will Be Soul. Let's get into it. Joe Gardner is a middle school music teacher in New York City who spends his days teaching music to unmotivated kids and his nights playing jazz with his friends, hoping to one day become a professional musician. For Joe, music isn't just his passion, it's everything. And while he appreciates his job, he feels unfulfilled until one day he meets a student named Custis, whose talent and passion for music inspires him to help the boy prepare for an upcoming audition. Joe sees the passion and determination in Custis and realizes that if the kid can make it to the prestigious music school, Juilliard, then maybe he, Joe, deserves to chase his dream a little more himself too. So Joe decides to accompany Curtis to the audition to show him some much-needed support. But on the way to the subway, an excited Joe gets distracted by a street performer and runs ahead, only to trip and fall into a manhole. When Joe wakes up, he finds himself floating above his body and soon realizes that his soul has been separated from his physical form. Panicked, he tries desperately to climb back into his body, but he's unsuccessful. Instead, he floats up into the air and finds himself arriving in a stunning realm full of warm colors, twirling shapes, and music. Joe learns that this is the great before, the place where all new souls come to discover their unique personalities before being sent to Earth. Joe tries again to get back into his body, but he is gently stopped by a group of helpful souls who explain to him that he won't be able to go back until his body goes to sleep. Since it's still daytime in New York, Joe has to wait a few hours before he can try again. Dejected, he wanders around the great before aimlessly and comes across a group of souls who are arguing with one another. The souls are trying to decide which personality traits they should have once they're born, with one soul insisting on being creative and another demanding to be smart. Joe stops to listen and inadvertently causes one of his souls to lose their balance. Joe reaches out to catch them, but instead of thanking him, the soul glares at Joe and disappears into the distance. A kind soul notices Joe's distress and introduces herself as 22.22, explains that the argumentative soul was once a normal soul, like any other. But after hundreds of years in the great before, they've become stubborn and refuse to move on. According to 22, that particular soul has given up on ever being born and living a human life. But Joe doesn't believe that anyone would willingly give up on such a wonderful thing. As proof, Joe asks 22 if she wants to see what it's like to be human, promising to take her to New York City, the greatest place in the world. Excited, 22 agrees. The two souls exit the great before together and arrive in the bustling city of New York. They watch street performers play instruments, laugh and sing. They look over at people enjoying their lives and marvel at the beautiful city around them. Joe points out the things that make New York special, like how even though everyone's from somewhere else, they all somehow end up here. He tells her about how sometimes people seem really lonely, but all they need is someone to talk to. Joe talks excitedly about music and how it makes him feel. He takes 22 to a jazz club where he plays music with his friends. She watches in awe as he improbably swings from one note to the next, entranced by the power of his music. After the performance, Joe is overcome with emotion and thanks 22 for coming with him. He explains that he thought that winning a Grammy would be the most amazing thing ever, but being able to share it with 22 and showing her the things that he loves most in the world, that's what makes life special. Joe thinks it's time to return 22 to the great before, but she wants to stay longer and begs Joe to take her to the place that made him want to be a musician. They travel to a park where Joe first fell in love with music, and he shows her how the music in the world around them, like birds singing, leaves rustling, and fountains spraying, inspired him to play. As they walk around the park, Joe notices something strange. Everything is white. No birds are singing, and the playground equipment is covered in dust. Realizing that this is the same park from earlier, but at night, Joe panics and tries to get 22 back to the great before. But she refuses to leave. As they argue, the ground beneath them begins to crack and break apart. They hold on to each other for support, but Joe accidentally lets go. 22 falls to the ground below and is enveloped in a blinding light. When Joe looks over the edge, he finds himself staring into the abyss. When Joe regains consciousness, he finds himself back in the great before. 22 is nowhere to be seen. And when he looks down, he notices that his feet aren't translucent anymore. In fact, they're wearing shoes. Thinking that he's back in his body, Joe jumps for joy. But when he looks around, he realizes that he's still floating. Looking down, he notices that while his top half is still his usual self, his bottom half is now that of a small child. It turns out that Joe didn't make it back to his body in time and ended up reincarnating into a new baby instead. Although very confused, Joe is excited to start a new life. And as he looks around, he notices that 22 is there watching him. Overjoyed, Joe races toward her, eager to thank her for helping him appreciate life. But as he approaches, she looks away, ashamed. 22 explains that she wasn't supposed to tell him this, but since he's so young, he won't remember anything about his old life. When Joe asks why she did it, 22 reveals that she didn't do it to hurt him. In fact, she wanted to help him. She admits that she was wrong for keeping him in the great before for so long, but insists that she was only trying to protect him. 22 confesses that she has been stuck in the great before for hundreds of years because she doesn't want to be born. She explains that she thinks life is too painful and that no one should have to experience it. Joe is horrified. He reminds 22 of all the good things they saw in New York, like the street musicians, the laughing families, and the delicious food. And he tells her that even though life can be tough sometimes, it's still worth living because every moment is precious. He thanks 22 for coming with him and apologizes for leaving her behind. Then he gives her a hug goodbye. Joe wakes up in his bed in New York and gasps for air. Outside, the sun is rising. He sits up and remembers his incredible adventure in the great before. Joe looks around the room and realizes that nothing has changed. His apartment is still messy and his cat is still sleeping in the laundry basket. Disappointed, he throws his head back on the pillow and closes his eyes. As he drifts off to sleep, he smiles and whispers, "It's going to be a great day." Outside, the sun shines brightly and warms the New York streets. A young girl walks past Joe's apartment building and whistles a tune. She skips up the stairs and hums as she opens her front door. We pull back to reveal that the door was actually Joe's. Now a kid, Joe Gardner looks out the window and watches the girl skip happily down the sidewalk. Joe gets dressed for the day and heads to the kitchen. His mother, who's getting ready for work, calls out to him and asks if he's hungry. "I made sweet potato toast," she says. Joe pauses for a moment, savoring the sound of his mother's voice, and replies, "That sounds amazing." As Joe eats his breakfast, we fade to black. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments. What other stories would you like to see us cover? We'd love to hear your suggestions.